A federal judge just tore up Secretary of State Marco Rubio's visa freeze, covering 75 countries, calling it Orwellian, and ordered the government to go back and look again at the people it turned away. Canada's Prime Minister says his country is now at war with the United States over trade, after Washington slapped 50% tariffs on its closest neighbor, and talks collapsed. The Postal Service has quietly written a 95-page rulebook that changes who gets a mail-in ballot in November, even after a court struck the underlying order down. And TikTok is reaching for its checkbook in a children's privacy case with a number attached that should make every parent look up. We have 6 stories today, and the last 3 are the ones nobody is talking about yet, including a $400 million settlement and a fired military newspaper editor who says he was silenced. Stay to the end, because the smallest story on this list may be the one that tells you the most about where this is heading. Orwellian. That is the word a federal judge used to describe a State Department policy that froze visa processing for applicants from 75 countries. Judge Jeanette Vargas struck the policy down and directed the government to revisit cases where applicants were denied under that freeze. The policy was associated with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and it is one of the broadest immigration restrictions the administration has attempted. Here's the context that matters. This ruling lands in a week when the same administration collected major wins at the Supreme Court, which allowed it to terminate temporary protected status for over 1 million migrants and to restrict asylum claims at the southern border. Justice Samuel Alito wrote for the majority that the text is clear. Justice Sonia Sotomayor dissented, warning of increased violence. So the courts are not moving in one direction. They are splitting, case by case. Why should you care about your own money? Visa pipelines are labor pipelines. Hospitals, universities, farms, construction firms, and tech employers all staff from these queues. And a freeze across 75 countries means delayed hires, stranded students, and separated families. Now watch for an appeal, and watch how fast the State Department actually reopens those denied files. Reported by Fox News. When a prime minister says his country is at war with the United States, that is not a metaphor you use casually. Mark Carney says Canada has been attacked by President Donald Trump on trade, and that Canada is now at war with its largest trading partner. The trigger is blunt. The United States has imposed 50% tariffs on Canada after trade talks collapsed. 50% is not a negotiating nudge. It is a wall. Understand what Canada is to the American economy? It is the neighbor that sends energy, lumber, aluminum, auto parts, and food across the border every single day, in supply chains that were built on the assumption that the border barely existed. Put a 50% tariff in the middle of that, and the cost does not vanish. It moves down the chain to builders, to car makers, to grocery shelves. Carney is under domestic pressure too. Commentator Hugh Hewitt has argued that Carney is driving Canada into the ground, so the Prime Minister is fighting on 2 fronts at once. What happens next is retaliation, and whether Canada answers with tariffs of its own, export restrictions, or a scramble to find buyers outside the United States. Reported by the New York Times. The Postal Service just wrote itself into the middle of the midterms. On Friday, the United States Postal Service announced new eligibility guidelines for mail-in ballots, complying with President Donald Trump's March executive order restricting the practice. Here's the part that raises eyebrows. A federal court later struck that executive order down, and the Postal Service is moving forward anyway. The document is a 95-page unpublished report detailing how the agency would distribute mail-in ballots for November's midterms, and it is slated for official release on August 26th. Separately, the Postal Service has published a rule to block mail-in ballots from states that do not provide voter lists. Think about what that means mechanically. Your ballot does not arrive because of a speech or a vote in Congress. It arrives because a logistics agency puts it in a truck. Change the eligibility rules at that layer, and you have changed who effectively gets to vote, in which states, without a single new law being passed. Elections decide tax rates, spending, and the regulators who police your bank and your employer. So this is a money story as much as a democracy story. Watch August 26th and watch for the courts to move again. Reported by The Hill. $400 million. That is the price tag on a settlement between the Department of Justice and TikTok in a children's privacy lawsuit, according to a scoop published today. For a company of TikTok size, a nine-figure payment is survivable, but it is not nothing. And settlements like this one are how the real rules of the internet actually get written. Not in legislation, but in the terms companies accept to make a case go away. Why does a children's privacy case matter to your household budget and your family? Because the product being fought over is your child's attention and your child's data, and because the amount a government is willing to accept sets the market price of breaking those rules. If the number is too low, it becomes a cost of doing business. If it is high enough, compliance teams get funded and product designs change. TikTok has been under sustained legal and political pressure in the United States for years over ownership, over data, and over what the platform does to minors. This settlement resolves one front, not the war. Watch for the final terms, for what TikTok is required to change, and for whether other platforms are next. Reported by Axios. President Donald Trump is once again claiming that the new White House ballroom costs taxpayers nothing. Zero. Free. The reporting says otherwise, pointing to other evidence that contradicts the claim, and it is not the first time the claim has been made or challenged. Meanwhile, the project keeps moving because the Supreme Court has allowed White House ballroom construction to continue for now. That phrase, for now, is doing a lot of work. It means the legal questions are not settled, only paused. So why spend a segment on a ballroom? Because free is the single most expensive word in government. Construction on federal property involves land, security, staffing, utilities, maintenance, and liability. And those lines do not disappear because a donor covers a portion of the build. Somebody maintains it for decades. Somebody insures it. And the public generally does not get to see the full accounting until long after the ribbon is cut. When an administration says a project is free to taxpayers, the burden of proof sits with the administration, not with the reporters checking it. Watch for the underlying litigation to resume, and watch for an actual itemized cost disclosure. Until that exists, treat zero as a claim, not a number. Reported by Forbes. The last story is the smallest one on today's list, and it may be the most revealing. The editor of a United States military newspaper has been fired, and he is now voicing fears about censorship, saying the press that covers the armed forces is being pressured. He is not an anonymous critic. He ran the publication, and he is speaking publicly after losing the job. Understand why a military paper is different from any other outlet. Its readers are service members and their families, and its beat is pay, housing, healthcare, deployments, discipline, and the conditions people live under while they serve. That is a consumer publication as much as a news one. When the editor of that publication says he was silenced, the practical question for a soldier's family is simple. Who tells you when your benefits change, when your base has a problem, or when a policy quietly shifts against you? The allegation here is his, and the details of the dismissal are contested, so we report it as an allegation. Watch for whether other staff speak up, whether any oversight body reviews the firing, and whether the paper's independence is formally restated. A newsroom that covers power only works if it can keep the job. Reported by the BBC. Watch August 26th for the Postal Service ballot rules, and watch for an appeal on that 75-country visa freeze. Which of these 6 actually hits your wallet first, the tariffs or the visa freeze? Tell me below, hit like and subscribe.